Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another impromptu stream. My guest, Halsey English, is in traffic and will be about 10 minutes late, but I am here and happy to get the stream going. I've seen you chattering away in chat. It's nice to see people interacting. The reason why I have called this meeting, the reason why I'm streaming this evening is for a couple of reasons. There's a news article. In fact, let me just share my screen, and it's been perplexing me, just in general, not just the language and the subject matter of the actual event, but just general questions about the broader context. So, this is the article in question. U.S. suspect was training children to commit school shootings. I don't know how much of a suspect he could be described as, seeing as he was on the site and was the one doing it. But in short, I'll go through the article and we can discuss basically what the problems are here, if it's not already self-evident, and some stuff. But I don't want to labor too long on it. If you want a really good breakdown, you should watch V's video. He did I think it's about 20 minutes long on this particular article. So there we go. Hot take: Sharia law would be better than the current UK law. I disagree significantly. Remove Saracens. Surely you mean? I don't know. Anyway, a man arrested after 11 malnourished children were found in a remote desert compound was training them to commit school shootings, US media has reported. According to prosecutors' documents, Siraj Ibn Wahaj, I'll give you some hints as to this man's religion, but it should be evident in the name, was teaching some of the children, aged 1 to 15, how to use weapons. One of two armed men arrested at the scene on Friday in New Mexico. 3 women were also arrested. Police say the remains of a boy were also discovered at the compound, which is a travesty. It's an absolute tragedy. Found on Monday, the remains are probably those of Mr. Wahaj's 3-year-old son. So that makes it so significantly worse. He was abducted from his Georgia home in December, and it was a search for him that led to these arrests. The toddler suffered from seizures, but Mr. Wahaj believed the boy needed to be exorcised. I mean, to me, it's insane that someone could take a child and just drive off with it into the desert and then abduct or raise, 11 others, and then decide when your child has died that the most appropriate thing to do is kill more children. I mean, that's an utterly bizarre way of thinking. Anyway, it goes on. All 5 adults were arrested and faced child abuse charges, which is fine, appropriate, significant problem. The officers who discovered the children said they looked like third world refugees. Not only no food, no water, no shoes, personal hygiene, and dirty rags for clothing. And this is in New Mexico, which is, as I say, just New Mexico. Police say they had been aware of the compound for some time, but had to wait for a search warrant before entering, as the occupants were most likely heavily... This has been added since I saw it last, were most likely heavily armed and considered extremists of the Muslim faith. Mr. Wahaj was armed with an AR-15. This can do marvels for the anti-gun lobby, isn't it? And 4 pistols, because 1 isn't enough, when they encountered him. Now, this is the kicker, and this is the thing which really got me thinking. But I'll go through chat just for a second. The Saracens were a faction of Muslims during the Middle Ages. I know them from Age of Empires 2, known primarily for their clashes with Crusaders led by Saladin. Yep. Saladin's Revenge is a campaign in Age of Empires 2, and that's how I know that one. Do you know how annoying kids can be? I do, but at the same time, they are innocents, and I'm in a serious mood this evening. You know how it can be. But this is the kicker from this article. As horrible and appalling as the rest of this is, according to New York media, Mr. Wahaj's father, Imam Siraj, I'm not going to try and pronounce that, is a prominent Muslim leader in Brooklyn who has been called one of the most admired Muslim leaders in the US. Reportedly testified as a character witness at the trial of the man who was convicted of bombing the World Trade Center. And yet, somehow, after this, he became the first Muslim to lead an opening prayer before the US House of Representatives. This is bizarre to me, how, one, someone can rise to such prominence. Secondly, how they can let their son get so out of hand. And thirdly, how they can testify as a character witness in favor of a domestic terrorist who is not domestic, just a terrorist, who then gets convicted and yet is still held in appropriate esteem to become the first Muslim to lead an opening prayer before the House of Representatives. This protectionism of Islam is, again, the word is bizarre. I don't understand what the line of thinking is. Now, this all comes at the same time as Boris Johnson saying he won't apologize for saying that the burqa, if you wear a burqa, you look a bit like a letterbox. And that sort of thing. And I didn't even know that we're... Yeah. Excuse my cat in the background, it's being noisy. Sorry about that. To be fair on the police, ever since the Waco debacle, they've been understandably reluctant to engage such compounds. What happened in Waco? Quite obviously. Yeah, for those who don't know, Boris Johnson made these comments. He then refused to apologize. Said Muslim women wearing burqas look like letterboxes and compared them to looking like... he didn't compare them to bank robbers. He said they look like bank robbers. Now, of course, the Prime Minister is backing calls for him to apologise, saying that they clearly caused offence. But an offence shouldn't be chargeable, but apparently in the UK it is. Mr. Johnson said he won't be apologising, adding it was ridiculous to attack his views. Don't fall into the trap of shutting down the debate on difficult issues. We have to call it out. If we fail to speak up for liberal values, we are simply yielding ground. So it's talking about sunlight being the best disinfectant. It's talking about how you need to challenge his views. And he made it effectively what is a joke, an offensive joke, and you just go, yeah, but you can see where the comparison comes from on a purely physical basis. It's silly. Good evening, Halsey.
How are you doing, my friend?
It's been a difficult day intellectually, but very relaxed physically. How are you?
What is a difficult intellectual day?
Well, I'm having the I've just gone through this article with the chat saying about the guy who was training children to commit school shootings in the desert.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing. And then I've been going through a lot of stats, opinion pieces, scientific stuff on Islam in general this afternoon, this evening. So it's been fairly heavy on that side of things. Pretty heavy.
You know, there was a show that was on years ago. It was called The West Wing. I don't know if you ever saw it.
I haven't. Sorry.
So it was very lefty, okay, but at the same time, it was very good. It was about like a Democratic president and how the inner workings of the White House were. And at one point, they did an episode about terrorism. Right? They had caught a pregnant woman who was smuggling a bomb in. Like she made her pregnant belly even bigger.
Okay.
So, and she was trying to blow up a bridge in America.
Oof.
And they were talking about it, and they were basically trying to convince the president that he had to launch an attack against this terrorist cell. And the president's argument was like, it's against international law because of this and this and this and this. And the general said, like, how can you talk about international law when what this woman is doing, a pregnant woman carrying a bomb, this is against the laws of nature.
Yeah.
Like, and it was such like a, I know I'm probably not doing it much justice, but it was such like a chilling moment, you know,
Mm.
when you think about that and how true it is that people training their children to go commit suicide and murder people.
Yes, it's utterly bizarre. One aside from anything, it's an act of pure cowardice because it's someone saying that they themselves do not consider themselves to be strong enough to, or in their own eyes of their own faith, etc. They don't consider themselves to be strong enough to go through the act of killing someone, but they'll train their offspring to do it.
Yeah.
It's very strange. Let's say chat's being very sarcastic. Good evening, working class liberalist. Nice to see you.
So yeah, where's the watch link? I want to say hi to the chat too.
Let me just drop it in the sidebar for you. There you go.
Excellent.
And there we go. Yeah, so I've been going through some interesting stats on Islam in the West and around the world, and this rather long document by Science Direct recently, talking about what has resulted in the clash, shall we say, of ideals and practices between Islam, primarily in Asia, and Islam and the Western values, and they split it down into 4 types of society. So hierarchical collectivist, which is very traditional society, think China. A horizontal collectivist society, which is sort of very lacking in hierarchy, but still in groups, and then a vertical individualist, which is a hierarchical individualist society, and then a horizontal individualist society, which very little hierarchy and thinking. Scandinavia, this is what they quote. I don't know, but that's how they split it down, and they're talking about the violence endemic in different types of societies that way, and what makes Islam different to other religions and why, and then they outline some solutions which I don't agree with. I think are quite naive, but the research here is good. So
I mean, you're dealing with a philosophy of the desert. The desert is very unforgiving. It's not the kind of place where like mercy helps people. So it's ingrained in them from basically birth that like you do what you have to do or you die.
Yeah.
So the only thing they respect is strength. That's the only thing they have any type of reverence for is strength.
Yeah.
Like that's why their Allah is like this vengeful, horrible, like angry God who will smite you instantly if you disobey him or his prophet. Like it's the law of the desert. It's how they live their whole lives. It's what their culture is.
Yes, and because of this advocation of sort of strength above all, this is one of the conclusions drawn by this document, talking about how religions and by extension collective groups become more violent when they are under attack or they feel they're under attack. So, for instance, they will perpetuate themselves due to there's a certain kind of religious experience that can be gained by defending your group or religion. So for and that includes in an offensive. So violence is especially likely when a religion feels under attack. Catholics felt under attack by Protestants and attacked them. All religions now feel under attack by modernity, science, technology, reason, the emphasis of customs and faith, and traditional authority, and of embeddedness in nature. So again, I don't agree with all of this, but the fact that this de-emphasis on customs and faith is very important. But there was something like, modernity is inconsistent with the attributes of much of current Islam. Though 12th century Islam was consistent with the modernity of that time, The existence of blasphemy laws, such as those found in Pakistan, suggests that in some parts of Islam, people feel that their religion is weak and needs protection. And let me see. Yeah. So the problem with the rejection of traditional Islam, as found in Turkey in the 20s, is that it involves a culture becoming more like the West, more complex, loose, individualistic, horizontal. This means the loss of traditional elements of culture, i.e., those elements that people find comfortable, those elements that define who people are in unique ways. Some changes can easily disorient people and have implications for their mental health. On the other hand, economic development divorced from global markets is rare. Thus, there is the dilemma. Muslims might ask, do we risk our mental health or do we remain poor? And poverty is also another major factor in violence, because when fighting for a cause, you get both a reason to live and employment, because if you're fighting for someone, you are employed, and in a land with very little employment, it seems that that's what people will want. There are a number of examples here where people drew their brothers or their children away from radical Islam by finding them jobs. And
that is, I'm sorry to say, that is complete and utter horseshit.
I mean, you're welcome to weigh in.
That is total nonsense. It has nothing. First of all, what they find among suicide bombers, right, is they tend to be college educated and they tend to be middle class. These are not poor, jobless, homeless people that are committing suicide and doing it so their families will have money. This is something that is an intellectual pursuit to them.
This is one of the things which as I say, the reason I'm bringing it up as well is because I do disagree with aspects of it. I do think that the idea that Islam feels under attack is certainly true, but I also think that it's it's not through without its reasoning. But basically the idea that Islam is mainly perpetuated in poor countries, and that's due to the fact that it gives a reason beyond oneself at the same time as providing employment.
Well, you have to remember something, though. Think about this, okay? And I'm going to say something a bit controversial here, but if you're a recruiter, right, you're trying to bring people into Hamas so that they will walk into an Israeli pizzeria and murder a whole bunch of babies, right? Mm. And you want to sit down the guy and you want to say, listen, the reason that you should do this is because we're winning. And they say, how do you consider that we're winning? We live in poverty. We have all these problems, blah, 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 right? And the guy says, we invade their countries and come in and they pay us to stay, even though we rape their women, we murder them in the streets. We tell them we will never be like you. We will never follow your laws. And no matter how much we tell them we hate them, they tell us that they love us and they make laws to protect anybody from talking about us. They put their dolls in our hijab to cover up just to make us feel better about looking at a doll. Everything is saying that we are winning, that God is making us win. Can you deny that? And I guarantee you that kid looks at him and goes, you know what, he's right.
Yeah. I can understand the rationale there. As I say, the conclusions, this guy wants to concludes most humans prefer peace to violence. Most Muslims are embarrassed by the violence of the 1%, are too timid to object, and I disagree.
There was a whole thing where the head of Hamas had said in an interview that there's no way that Israel can ever defeat Hamas because Hamas loves death more than Israelis love life.
Wow, that's a strong statement.
Yep.
I just the relationship, like, I'm trying to understand the mindset of Islam, and
it's a conquering mindset. You have to understand that when your religion tells you that the greatest glory you can get is by conquering and by spreading your belief through the sword.
The greatest value in Islam is the taking of land. That's one of the key things.
And giving your life in that pursuit is the highest you can strive for.
Yeah, I mean, you saw that with the guy in France who threw himself out a window shouting he didn't fear death, he was going to paradise, and so on. After he'd murdered 7 people, I think. But so here's an interesting one from Pew Research, and this is devoid of the opinion of the previous piece. A 2011 survey asked about characteristics Westerners and Islam associated with one another. Across the 7 Muslim majority countries and territories, 68% median, so the mean is higher, of Muslims said they view Westerners as selfish. And I cannot understand that as what level of propaganda effectively is going through those nations to make that be a majority viewing.
Why is that? What's not to get about that?
Well, it's more like self-interest drives all people. It doesn't matter if they are Islamic or not. That self-interest drives, and that includes in terms of sort of altruistic giving and that sort of thing. Because unless it's taxation or of any form, I think it's the only one. Submitting to taxation is one of those things which we do, which is not done through self-interest necessarily. But the altruism, people give because they feel good about giving. People virtue signal because they feel good about virtue signaling. Now, it doesn't matter at the end of the day necessarily whether or not that altruistic action on the part of the individual has an actual positive outcome, because
but Mark, you're not putting yourself in the mind of the Muslim religious society. Selfish to us is keeping treasure, keeping money, or keeping possessions to yourself and not sharing, and not helping the poor, let's say, right? In a Muslim society, they say, look at how selfish their women are, that they would prefer to go work amongst men as opposed to having babies and raising their next generation. Look at how selfish they are, that they believe that having sex with someone that you're not going to marry is just to have fun. Like, to them, that it's filthy, it's disgusting, it's so selfish that you only care about your own feeling good, as opposed to the betterment of your people or the betterment of your religion or pleasing your God. To them, there's no greater level of selfishness than the way the Western society functions.
Well, they're an obligation-based society rather than a freedom-based society.
But they don't see their obligations as obligations. They see them as freedom. They see them as they're given the freedom to follow the ways of Allah or not, and they're choosing to follow the ways of Allah.
It's very black and white to them, to be blunt.
Oh, it's 100% black and white.
Hence apostasy laws. The Westerners, so these are the shares of like the negative adjectives. Violent. Westerners are violent. Now I can understand that one because we've been bombing places, but I don't know. I can see them saying Western nations are violent without having been here, and I have no doubt that the people in power who are seeing their political allies being shelled and attacked by the West, legitimately or otherwise, as acts of violence. Greedy, I can also see that. Immoral, which is the big one. I'm surprised the immoral one is so low, to be honest.
Why? They don't see it they don't see it as we're immoral because we're making a choice to be immoral. They see us as immoral because we don't know the ways of Allah. So to them, there's a word amongst there's a phrase to describe that in Catholicism, Judaism, and Islam. In Judaism, it's called like a newborn baby. They say a person who's never learned the ways of the Torah can't be held responsible for not knowing what they're doing is wrong. It's like a child that hasn't been taught, and they look at it the same way.
Current comment in chat says, I grew up in the Middle East, then came to the UK for university. Demographics here are similar to Dubai. I don't know. I don't know. I assume you're talking about basically the racial demographic of the UK. I wonder what part of the UK you're in, but also what your experience has been of the UK compared to somewhere like Dubai. Obviously, Interestingly, the majority Muslim nations which have prospered are the ones with oil and nothing else. But
I mean,
the
I spent 10 years in the Middle East myself. I lived in Israel for 10 years.
yeah,
So I've experienced the violence and the terrorist attacks and all of that up close myself.
mm,
And what the hardest part about it is seeing the pure heartlessness of it. You know, like there was one point, and I'll try not to be too graphic, but a Palestinian terrorist had snuck into a house, right? And they killed a mother, a father, a 6-month-old baby, and 3 other children with a knife.
mm.
Okay. And then they were shot by the security guard when whatever. The Palestinians poured out into the streets in every single town and were dancing and hugging each other and handing out candies for a successful, mission against the enemy. Like literally stabbing a 6-month-old baby dead to death for them was a beautiful thing.
I have no doubt that dehumanization is very real on both sides. Like, I'm not defending the Palestinians, and I'm supporter of the Israeli state. But I'm just curious about the things that would lead people to be in the mindset where they would consider that to be okay, and not just okay to be celebrated.
I mean, they did the same on 9/11 when 9/11 happened, and that's when you saw the Palestinian security forces like going through the streets saying, "No, get out of the street, get out of the street. This is bad optics." You
Oh,
know,
I mean, I know I saw that with the some of the Islamic prison, like the Islamic prisoners in the UK when things are happening. When things like Lee Rigby was murdered, etc., they were dancing around in their cells.
mm-hmm.
Um,
There's
let
an
me
interesting
see.
comment in the chat where
Go.
someone just said, "Honestly, as neither a Middle Easterner nor a Brit, I find all this talk of demographics hard to believe." There's a saying amongst Palestinians in the territories where they say the Arab womb is greater than any suicide bomb, because they don't think tomorrow, they think generationally. They think
Yes.
that while we're killing you in battle, we're also outbreeding you.
Yeah. This is the argument. They reckon it's 1 century before they overtake Christians as the main religion on Earth, and that's just the way they're going. I am curious. I think, yeah, this is very strange here.
The really hard thing for anybody in the West to stomach, and this is actually why the hate speech laws in places like Britain are so terrifying to a person like me,
Mm,
is that there is going to come a day where there will be a war between the West and Islam. It will happen. I'm not saying it might or it could. It will absolutely 100% happen one day. Might not be for 100 years, but it will happen.
mm.
And it's very difficult to think about the idea that there's going to be this clash of civilization, that that we're actually sticking up for these people who want to kill us, because you should be allowed to sound a warning bell, like by saying
This is so something that I find utterly bizarre is like people who've declared their own support for ISIS or Islamism or jihadism being allowed to retain their citizenship. I do not know why. I like the nation state does not go to war anymore. As in, the UK is not at war with Syria. We have not declared a state of war. We have the quote unquote war on terror that has been going on. That was sort of it's an ideological buzzword, but the idea is that we should be able to say we are at war and then be able to make appropriate restrictions based on a wartime scenario. Like, take a stat like this, right? Views of ISIS. Do you have an opinion on the Islamic militant group in Iraq known as ISIS? Take Pakistan. 28% unfavorable, and the rest are either favorable or don't know. Why are we taking anyone from Pakistan as an immigrant? As in the UK, for instance, I have no idea. Like, it is unbelievably ironclad that if you're chucking people off buildings for their sexual preference, then you are.
Goes good to no, take it back. Don't even say for their sexual preference. Just say if you're chucking people off buildings.
Yeah, sure.
Forget
Oh,
what
okay.
the justification they're using for it is. If you're throwing people off of buildings, there's a huge problem here.
Yeah, no, I agree. And so you just go, why are we taking anyone from this country? Oh, because it's not all. And you go, yeah, but we're at war. We're at war with these people, and so to be perfectly honest, we're not going to take people in unless they have an unfavorable view of. We'll take people from Lebanon, to be honest, because they're 100% unfavorable. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You just go, I do not understand, particularly when in the UK in particular, where we have a 5.09% Muslim population and growing, right? The vast majority of which are Pakistani. I believe it's 3% of that 5%. Are Pakistani, and you just go, how have they come over? Why have they come over? And you know, if they've got this kind of thing, what are we doing to ensure that the education is correct, that they are not being basically in favor of a terrorist organization? It beggars belief that this is not on the agenda for Parliament every week. I don't understand.
I don't understand why if someone says, let's say the prime minister says, you know what we're going to do? We're going to bring in 1 million Muslim refugees this year, right? And someone says, but that's absurd. And they said, well, why is it absurd? Because the Islamic religion is violent by nature. You're bringing them in from an area with incredibly high rates of illiteracy, of poverty, and of violence. Like, these people just dislike the West. You give all of the reasons. And they're basically like, well, no, but not all of them are like that, number one. And number two, but we can help them by bringing. No, we can't help them. This is a danger to my family. Oh, you're speaking hate. Fine. That's fine. Okay, I hate them. I don't want you to bring them here because I hate them. Now, I have to go to jail? You know,
Yeah.
This is my country. I'm a citizen.
Yeah.
I'm a part of the social contract. You know what I'm saying? What I want.
Yeah. The idea that hate is not a legitimate or justifiable emotion at times is something which is completely taken apart by the left, because they have this weird kind of. I sort of addressed this in my "We Live in Dangerous Times" video, which basically says we don't live in dangerous times, or dangerous enough times for most people. In particular, like the left typically are relatively well educated, mainly the middle class, or upper, and they are, you know, they're not the party of the working class at all. You know, they're all champagne socialists by anyone's standard from the past thing. So they do not suffer. I mean, they may suffer some of the things which everybody suffers, you know, the loss of family, etc., etc., but not due to an act of extreme violence or anything like that. It's natural causes, or it's cancer, something which you can't do it. You know, it's a disease or something. But even then, most diseases are eradicated, so it's typically cancer, nasty car accident, or or natural causes. So you get this disconnect between the suffering of that, and so the idea that they could hate someone or someone could hate them for an arbitrary reason is kind of divorced from their reality, because even if they hate someone, nothing happens to them because of it. And so they get to the idea where they become so sensitive to hate and any perceived slight against them or a protected group that they are advocating for, that then becomes a criminal offense.
But that's my point. And someone in the chat just said it, like it would eventually lead to them calling you Islamophobic or something like that. But
I find them Christendom phobic. You know, it's just.
But again, if I was arguing with someone and I said, no, I absolutely will not support bringing a single Muslim into my town, and they're like, well, you know, that's a very hateful thing. Okay, that's fine. Well, what do you mean that's fine? If you want to just say that I don't want them here because I hate them, that's fine. I do hate their culture. I think their culture is disgusting. I don't want to bring them around my children. My children will not be safe. Well, you're just Islamophobic. Okay, you can call me any name you want. That isn't the closing argument, is that you can call me a name. You know, like you should be able to make an argument as to why it's a good thing to bring violent people who cannot provide for themselves into your country, instead of your argument being that you're going to call me names.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. It's like it doesn't even. This is the weird thing because again, the more opinion-based article was talking about the fact, and it used it a lot, that 1% of Muslims are the radical jihadists. Now that's no. It's not necessarily bullshit that those are the ones who are the 1% are committing the vast majority of the violence. However, the difficulty with Islam is the attitude of the 99% to the 1%. Do you know what I'm saying? So in our society, in every society on earth, around 1% to 3% are totally nuts. They are radical, stupid, violent, or any combination of the above. Now, what happens when one of these people commits a crime or does something beyond the pale? It is universally condemned by the rest of that society. So if we have someone who we have a murderer who kills someone, then that person is condemned. If we have someone who is a rapist, that person is condemned, that sort of thing. With Islam, if it's justified by their use of the scriptures, then those people are not held. It's like a quarter or more of Muslims say acts of violence are at least sometimes justified, which includes 40% of the Palestinian territory saying that. And you just go, how do you know, like, the issue is not the 90 is the 1%, but it's also the 60% who are the 40 to 60% who would take these people into their own home and say, yeah, you there's nothing wrong with what you did. I couldn't do it, but what you've done is justified according to scripture, and at our side. You're attacking the enemy. That's the thing. It's like there is no widespread condemnation. It's like when in Christendom, say something like the Catholic Church. We've had the scandal with the priests who have been pedophiles, who have all been exposed recently in the last sort of 3 decades. At which point the Catholic Church has had to condemn them. It's had to drag them out in front of everyone. It's had to make concerted efforts to rooting these people out and throwing them under the bus and ensuring that they get convicted, etc. In Islam, you find that the mosque which trained Abu Hamza and has been responsible for things like what's his name? I can't remember, this imam who was saying loads of stuff which was really horrendous. And that mosque has not been shut down. The leadership of that mosque has not been displaced. That mosque is still in attendance by the majority of the people who are going there. It is not considered to be an like a massive no like the Westboro Baptist Church. It's not like the other Muslims are saying, oh yeah, they're nuts over there, that's the crazy church. You don't have satirical silly articles about the crazy mosque over there who want to kill everyone, and there's nothing we can do about it because of free speech. But at the same time, we are damn well keeping an eye because that's the crazy people. Instead, you get this widespread sort of blanket sort of yeah, well, they're interpreting the faith their way. Some of what they did was justified. And you just go, how is this happening? Why is this happening? How can they be protected? Why is there no ability to have this conversation? Do you know what I'm saying?
Further, how racist is it that they'll say, okay, we can't allow you to draw a picture of Muhammad, right? Why? Because it'll make the Muslims so crazy that they'll riot in the streets and start killing people.
Yeah, well, this is the thing which we see again and again and again. It's like, we're going to prevent you from going this way because we're going to arrest you for potentially causing a breach of the peace. It's like, no, we're not going to cause a breach of the peace. We're going to ask some questions, and if those questions are taken badly, that is not our fault. They can walk away at any time. There's not a problem there. They can say, we don't want that. They could ignore us for the entire time. But no, you're saying they're going to pick up a chair and smash us over the back of the head with it because they're so insensitive and
incapable of controlling themselves,
and intolerant.
So incapable. Yeah,
it's disgusting, absolutely disgusting.
Which is why I said to Muslims, they're winning. The idea that we're not like they come into our town, into a town and kill somebody, and we respond, right, by hunting down a foot soldier in the middle of a town and do everything possible to make sure nobody gets hurt. Like, you know, you go after the leaders. You don't go after the foot soldier who's hiding in an alley somewhere with a bunch of kids. But we're so afraid to even do that. They bomb some and kill a whole bunch of Brits or a whole bunch of Americans. We bomb a whole bunch of empty buildings or a runway, and we consider that a response.
I know. I'm exasperated, Halsey. I'm utterly exasperated.
It makes men mad. It makes men mad.
It drives me insane. I mean, I've just moved to majority Muslim area.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry.
In London. No, don't be. It's cheap. Okay. But it's all right. But it's very strange walking around because obviously the culture's different. Everyone seems to dress the same. But second, like the women in particular look scared when I approach. And that's a very strange thing. I'm not a scary man, if that makes sense. Most of the time, I don't intend to be, and but they have this sort of wild-eyed look that they may be attacked by that. It's just a very strange, like they're on edge all the time, ready to go. Do you know what I mean? Like either run or attack.
Mm-hmm.
It's just I can't comprehend both what life is like for them and what kind of bizarre, sort of false lens they're viewing the world through. That makes them act the way they do as well.
They're viewing through the world through the lens of being the winner. In their minds, they're winning. That they believe they're winning. They're invading Britain and being given welfare benefits and homes and having laws changed to suit them. Brits are being thrown in jail for criticizing their behavior. Like they are winning in their minds. In their minds, they walk the earth to a completely different standard of anybody around them. So in their mind, this is how a winner acts. If I want to throw my garbage on the ground because I know you're going to clean it up, then why am I not going to throw my garbage on the ground? Like they literally are acting triumphant in our societies, and we're okay with that. But we're not okay with somebody pointing out that this is horrible. We throw those people in jail. Jada Franson is a very good friend of mine. She's in jail right now for saying nasty things about Muslims.
Yep. It's like, what can I say, Halsey? What can I say? I agree.
It's one of those things that it's not going to just lead to a clash of civilizations between us and the Muslims. It's going to lead to a clash of civilizations between us and us. I mean, there gets to a point where you have to look at these loony leftists and you have to say, listen, if you keep insisting on bringing hordes of Muslims into my town over my goddamn dead body, like this is not going to be okay. I'm not going to subject my children to being raped in the street. And if they are raped, to be told not to mention it because I might offend somebody. I'm sorry. No, it's just not going to happen.
Yes.
And that's the really sad part, is that it's going to lead to this between ourselves.
Yeah.
And
I just, it's bizarre as well how, because the Muslims are kind of like, because communists don't really have that much of a grounding in the UK, Islam is like the collectivist group. Okay. Like, because it's a big group proportionally. And I think that's one of the reasons why the left wants to protect them so much as well, is they are a collectivist group. Very, very, the first thing that if you ask them to describe themselves, the first thing that they will say is, I'm a Muslim. That's the only thing. In the same way that the leftists, it's either, I'm an activist or I'm a LGBTQ or whatever. That's the primary way in which they describe themselves. It's like,
That's their flag.
yeah, I'm a feminist. It's not. It's not. I am Mark, and I like cycling or whatever, and I'm also a Christian, and I do this, that, and the other. It's no, I am this, and I am my group, and my group is me. Even though the naivety of that is the group isn't you, and if you do something to contravene the group will eject you without any sort of reticence on their behalf.
Well, I mean,
they won't care.
I was talking to a group of people today that are in the alt-right, right? And they couldn't wrap their heads around the idea that I say I'm an American, because to them I'm Jewish, or I'm from an Irish background or anything like that. But I don't think all I think about of myself is I don't think of myself as a white American, a Jewish. I'm an American. If people ask me, like, what is my ethnicity, I'm Jewish. But if you ask how I define myself, I'm an American.
Yes.
And for some reason, this is like offensive to other people. Like that I'm not willing to like separate myself from being an American and give my like little unique spiel as to who else I am.
Yeah, because the American, just the idea of the American nation as well, because the American nation is defined by its citizens much more than any other nation. Do you know if you know what I'm saying? In that, it's always been a melting pot.
But it's also always been African Americans, Italian Americans, Irish Americans. Like it's not that common that if someone says, "Oh, where's your like ethnicity," that someone will say, "I'm an American." Even though for hundreds of years and 10 generations they were in America.
Yes, it's one of the reasons why many people outside of America get irritated when an American comes to them and goes, "I'm Irish."
Yeah, they've never been there. They've never like ever eaten real Irish food. They've they have no idea what Irish culture is, what Irish language sounds like.
They're really connecting with their history. I mean, I can understand wanting to research and look into your history, but
I mean, I've done all that myself. But I'm just saying, like, when all's said and done, I'm very comfortable being American. I'm very happy being an American. Like, and it actually like makes them a little crazy. It's like it's strange, because to them it's the fact that they're white is the primary driver of how they see themselves.
Yes, in a sense, just the same as any other identitarian group. Yeah.
Right, but they'll say to me like, "Oh, the only reason that you even like bother with any of us is because if we get our white ethno state, you're going to want to live there." I said, "God forbid. I wouldn't want to live in a white ethno state. I don't mind that you do. I don't consider that to be a bad value if that's what you want for your life." And they'll say, "Well, why wouldn't you want to live in our white ethno state?" And I say, "Because I don't define myself by my whiteness. Like I'm perfectly comfortable defining myself by my nationality."
You'd have to constantly like, this is the thing as well. You'd particularly someone who, if you don't look, shall we say, the norm, you constantly have to defend your right to be there based on an arbitrary characteristic, which you wouldn't do. You would not be prepared to do. Zertzitzer in chat says, "Just think how welfare payments look to someone who thinks he is owed a tax by non-believers."
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Particularly when it's so easy to get when you are illiterate, unemployable, and you can get across for free effectively.
Well, think about it. Also, they've also just lied about the fact that they're a refugee.
That's the thing as well. Is like the aid organizations that basically pulled out of Eastern Europe because they were like, there are no refugees here, none.
Just so you know, Mark, I'm going to be jumping off in like 6 or 7 minutes, but
that's fine, mate. We'll bring it to a close for then. That's fine.
No. Are you saying Ashley is saying she's up for a stream? So
she wants to stream another time on a less divisive topic that she knows more about.
Well, the worst thing, Mark, is, and I'm telling you, you're probably like, YouTube has algorithms that listen to the speech of what you say. there's a decent chance that you're going to either get this video restricted or that you could possibly even get a community strike for it.
It would be interesting.
I got my channel nuked over something I said about Islam once. I got my first YouTube channel, like they canceled it.
I am curious. I mean, because I am not. I'll make the argument that I'm opening up the dialogue, so that'll go down well, because that's exactly what they said about what is it, like when someone slaps down like white guys in a white conservatives in meetings. Oh, we're just opening a dialogue up about XYZ rubbish.
Yeah, that's such bullshit.
Yeah,
I mean, it's really, and this is, I mean, this is why we have such issues with the way the left is going right now, is because they're incorporating every one of these crazy beliefs and sticking by it. Like,
well,
you know,
this is the difficulty with the collectivist versus the individualist. Works very well when everyone's individualist, but the difficulty, like, this is the reason why anarchy doesn't work, because there's a balance to be struck between collective thought, nationalist thought, etc., and individualist freedom and thought, because otherwise the collectives, as we sort of see now, sort of lean in and start to take control, and they've been encroaching for the last 40 to 50 years anyway on, say, British soil, and it's very difficult to think about how to fight them without engaging in the same game that they are, which everyone loses from. We know that from the 20th century. So when you have collectives who are, because that you can have a few leaders of the collective who push for something with the assurance that the rest of the collective, regardless of any kind of real nuance in what they believe, will vote or will push for the legislation of one thing that you tell them to push for without much trouble. And the only way individualism really fights against that is if individuals rally behind a leader who they do it, but individualists tend to not really like leadership that much in the same way that collectives do, because particularly a collective that says if you leave the collective you'll die, you can understand why that collective has grown to the power that it has. Yeah,
it's yeah.
Anyway, thanks for joining us, man.
No, I love coming on these streams. I'm really glad I was able to jump in.
Yeah, just a short one today for chat, etc. But this is just what's running around in my head. I'm planning on doing a ton more research into this topic and breaking down some of the claims, but it's proving from my preliminary thoughts to be unbelievably complex. So this may be something where I work on it for 6 months and then produce one video and then keep going. But I will be streaming about thoughts and bits and pieces as and when I can, I imagine. But yeah, thanks for joining us, everyone, and catch you on the next one.
Thanks, guys.